How Snowflake became a $60 billion unicorn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're exploring the incredible rise of Snowflake, the cloud data powerhouse that has taken the tech world by storm. From its early days to becoming a $10 billion giant, Snowflake has redefined how we think about data storage and analytics in the cloud. Join us as we dive into the story of how Snowflake disrupted the industry and carved out its place as a leader in the data revolution. In 2020, Snowflake went public and was the largest software IPO of all time. The stock was over $300 in the first day, and anyone who joined Snowflake as an employee pre-IPO was basically instantly a millionaire. Now, on the outside, it's not easy to tell why Snowflake was so successful. If you're not intimately familiar with data warehouses and how the data stack has evolved over the last decade, it can be hard to tell how a company that's making something like a database or a data warehouse, something that's existed for decades and decades at this point, could be so valuable and so disruptive. So I want to make a quick video describing that. So in order to truly understand why Snowflake was so successful, you really have to go back and understand what the data world was like before Snowflake, and in some ways, before even the cloud. Data warehouses have been around for decades and decades at this point, but they were actually pretty complicated systems to operate. So when you look at the market, you had things like Redshift, which was a lot easier to spin up and spin down than, let's say, some of the more on-premise solutions, but it still had a lot of issues with regards to different parts of your business, executing a ton of concurrent queries against the data warehouse system. The whole system of Redshift is kind of architected around a queue of queries where the first one in is the first one that's processed, and that's really hard to scale across a wider enterprise where everyone has different needs. There are also still challenges when you need to add more storage to Amazon Redshift, or do anything like that. There's still kind of manual resizing, and it can take a day or even 2 days to actually change the size of the warehouse clusters. All the data has to be reorganized. Before that, there were on-premise solutions where they overall just had a really high cost of ownership. That's kind of the case for most on-prem software altogether. So not only be thinking about the software level, but also the server level. And they're just kind of difficult to scale across the organization. So you start seeing this pattern where different teams and departments actually have their own data warehouse, making it hard to really have a central source of truth. And lastly, there was a flavor of sort of data warehouse solutions called data lakes, like Hadoop and HDFS, that came out between these years. That solves some of the challenges that were found in traditional data warehouses, but overall were still not a hands-off solution. They were still something that was pretty difficult to maintain and manage. They were really great for running high-performance computations that you were going to really optimize, but they didn't really have the user experience of a data warehouse like a Redshift or Snowflake from a usability perspective. So to summarize it, all of the prior solutions really suffered from some combination of poor performance once you hit a certain scale, not just because of your performance limitations, but also because you had to have all these resources around optimizing the system and how it was used at the company, which is just not feasible for a lot of companies when it comes to analytics. So what about Snowflake? So Snowflake was actually founded by some of the principal architects of some of the previous generations of data warehouse software at Oracle, one of the leading companies in the whole database space, not just data warehouse space, but all the database space. And their goal was to dramatically simplify the world of data warehousing. They wanted to create a fully managed solution where it almost felt like a SaaS tool, like using Google Drive or Gmail. The goal of a data warehouse was to allow you to put a bunch of data into it and then analyze it in any which way you wanted. They wanted you to be able to do exactly that and not have to think about hardware, not have to think about manually allocating resources, not have to spend time or wait around resizing things. So it was really the first fully managed solution. There were cloud solutions like Redshift before, which sort of transported the on-prem model to the cloud. But this was the first fully managed or cloud-native solution for data warehousing. What really made Snowflake unique? Sure, it's a managed solution. It's easy to use. But what are the key points that differentiated it from previous generations of data warehouses? So the first point is really that they embrace this idea of separating storage and compute. What this means is that if I want to enormous amounts of data in a data warehouse and just keep piling on data into it, Since the idea is collecting data from all parts of the business, I simply have to pay as a customer for the amount of gigabytes or terabytes or petabytes of data that's being stored inside of a solution like Snowflake, rather than pre-allocating servers that have a certain amount of storage and a certain amount of processing power. And likewise, with separation of storage and compute, I can just pay for how many seconds my queries are running instead of actually having any sort of pre-allocation on that side of the fence either. The next thing that Snowflake really got right, I would say point number 2, is scalability. All the previous generations of solutions just had a lot of work when it came to scaling it up. If you wanted to use the data warehouse at one point of the day, 10 times as much as you use it at other points of the day, or if you just as a business were growing and putting more and more data and more queries and more BI reports or operational processes across your business off the data warehouse, scalability was something you always had to be thinking about. Whereas with Snowflake, it's very much a built-in auto-scaling mechanism. A big part about this, like auto-scalability and the separation of storage and compute, is offering a different pricing model than previous generations of data warehouses. So with previous generations of data warehouses, you had to really reserve your resources ahead of time, but Snowflake was entirely a pay-as-you-go model. So the last point I would say really matters is that Snowflake was multi-cloud. What that means is that you are not locked into one cloud like AWS, Google, or Azure as a company. You can actually deploy Snowflake to any cloud you want. So instead of using a service that's built into one of those clouds like Google BigQuery or Amazon Redshift, where if you want to spend across multiple clouds in the future or move from one to another, kind of out of luck, you have to actually migrate the way your software operates. Whereas with Snowflake, they're an independent company that's deployed across many different clouds. And to kind of sum up these 4 points, I would say the big value prop of Snowflake, frankly, was that the solution just worked. It was easy to use. You paid for what you used. It just kind of worked out of the box, and you didn't have to have a huge team that was maintaining the system. You could really focus on getting your data in order and figuring out the best ways to use it across your business. So the most interesting part about Snowflake, in my opinion, is that not only was it a disruptive technology in terms of providing a new data warehouse to companies, but it actually changed the way that companies use data warehouses altogether. So for one, a lot of the tools that were previously architected around things like ETL, or getting data into the warehouse, transforming data that lands in your data warehouse to be in different formats, or have your core business models defined in them. Even things like BI had certain limitations based on the limitations of data warehouses themselves. For example, in the olden days, you would have to transform data before you actually put it in the data warehouse, because running these big transformations inside the data warehouse would not be as efficient or easy to operate on. With the cloud data warehouse model, which is kind of like auto-scalable, pay for what you use, the ELT model instead of ETL, basically transforming data after it's loaded into the warehouse instead of before. So altogether, I would say that not only did Snowflake disrupt what it meant to be a data warehouse, but this disruption was actually so vast that it actually allowed a whole other set of companies to be created around the disruption that Snowflake was bringing to the data market. And a lot of people refer to this as sort of the modern data stack today. So I think for anyone who's noodling on the data space, the next big million-dollar question is, what's the next big platform shift in the data space or in software altogether? And that's the story of Snowflake's remarkable $10 billion journey to becoming a cloud data powerhouse. If you found this deep dive into Snowflake's success fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more tech stories like this. What are your thoughts on Snowflake's impact on the cloud industry? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.